This was last year. During a solo road trip. I was taking from Wisconsin to Montana. Most of the roads there are basically barren aside from the first hour. And the last hour. Everything else is forest. Or open fields, maybe some small mountains too. Once I got further west anyway. Because of how I had everything scheduled. I was going to be driving through the night and most of the day rather than taking up 2 full days of driving. And having to spend on an extra hotel in between. I knew it would still be tough, but I thought it was worth it. I started the drive at 7:00 p.m. I double-checked. I had everything packed into my car. And had my snacks and stuff in the front seat with me. Then I headed onto the road. First hour was through the city and small towns. But then it was open road from there, barely any cars. And not many places to stop aside from a gas station. Every 15-ish miles by hour or two I'd only used up a third of my gas tank. But with the gas station seeming to get further and fewer between, I figured I'd top off before entering the really rural section of the drive. It took 20 minutes before I finally found a station to stop at. Nobody else was there. It was just some really small place with 4 gas pumps. The convenience store wasn't even open. I pulled in and parked next to a pump, getting out and starting to pump the gas. I don't know if it was because the place was older, or maybe hadn't been filled up in a while. But the gas was coming out really slow, like almost a whole minute. Just for 1 gallon to come out. I leaned up against my car and just waited. That's about when another car came down the road. The speed limit was 55, but it looked like they were only going 20 or 30 initially, passing the gas station. But then slowing down and backing up. That was strange. And honestly a bit dangerous on a single road like that in the middle of the night. But they backed up to the entrance and pulled into the station parking at the pump right behind me. I figured they just missed the entrance and really needed gas. I stayed looking forward at my pump as I heard someone get out and walked to the side of their car. But after a minute of not hearing them starting to pump the gas or even move at all, I glanced over to see what they were doing. The man was wearing a gray flannel and black jeans, and was relatively tall, and he was staring at me like. When I looked over, he was already looking at me. I awkwardly smiled and nodded, then looked away again. I couldn't help but feel like he was still looking at me though. After a good 10 seconds, I finally heard him grab the pump and put it in his car. I felt relief, like maybe he was just getting gas. And I was overthinking it. I was out there for another minute before deciding I'd waited enough, and just took the pump out and locked up my gas cap. When I did, I saw the man looking at me again. His eyes were so dull and heavy, like he was tired but chugged caffeine or something. I got in and pulled back onto the road. Weird guy, I thought, but I didn't put too much weight on it. At some point during the next 3 hours of the drive, it started raining. I'd now been driving for 5 hours total, and it was just past midnight. The rain made me feel like I had to pay more attention to the road, which in turn made the drive more exhausting and tiring. I tried opening an energy drink and snacking, but it really didn't help all that much. By 1 a.m. I just needed a break. My gas was starting to run low too. I drove down the long barren road until finally there was a gas station to pull off at. It looked pretty rundown and was just as empty as the last one, but still had lights on and everything. I pulled in and filled up my tank, then pulled into the side of the small building and parked in one of the spaces. I looked up the weather to see how long the rain would last, and I looked up any nearby towns, but there were none. It looked like I was basically right in the middle of nothing. I ended up deciding I was good to take a 30-minute nap just to refresh myself, and hopefully the rain would slow down too. I leaned back and fell asleep. When I woke up, rain was still slapping against the roof, and my alarm hadn't gone off yet. It had only been about 25 minutes. I sat up and looked out the windshield. The whole place was quiet, but there was a car at one of the pumps. I leaned forward and looked closer. It was the same one from the other stop. I was almost sure of it either. This was a really big coincidence, or something was wrong. Even more odd, the guy wasn't anywhere. I could see not in his car or outside. I felt my face start to go pale. Where the hell was this guy? There was nowhere else at this empty gas station that man could possibly be at. Whatever this was, I didn't want to stay to find out. I turned on the car and put it in reverse. But when I looked in my mirror, as I backed out, I saw him not behind my car. He was in my back seat, eyes piercing through the dark at me. I jolted forward and kicked my door open, jumping onto the pavement. The car was still in reverse, so it was slowly backing up. I started running, but I never heard the man get out of the car. I ran into the woods, then watched as my car continued to roll back. For a while, then suddenly stopped a second later. He drove away, leaving me stranded at some unknown gas station in the middle of nowhere. It was then I realized my phone was still on the dashboard. I stood there in shock for a minute, standing in the rain and taking in the reality of the situation. Then I looked over at the car. He just left his own car. I walked over and found the door to be unlocked, keys in the ignition, and random groceries in the back seat. And by some odd chance, I found the phone laying on the floor by the passenger seat. It was locked, but I was still able to call 911 on the lock screen. I didn't realize it at the time. I guess I thought whoever stole my vehicle was just stupid and left everything behind. But this car wasn't theirs, it was also stolen. Everything in it was from someone else that the man had done the same thing to as he did to me. Though from what I heard, they weren't as lucky to get out completely unharmed. When talking with investigators, they seemed to think the man didn't sneak into my back seat and let me start leaving for no reason likely. He was going to wait until we were on the road to reveal himself. And who knows why he would want me hostage, or what he planned to do. He was never found, and neither was my car. This was last year in the middle of January. I live in a relatively small home in a small woodsy town. It was about 45 minutes outside of the city. I only had a half day of work, so this night I was free to chill at home around 7. I got an unexpected call from a friend. He said he was having car troubles, and asked if I could do him a solid and give him a ride home, maybe grab some food too. I didn't mind at all and said I'd be right over. This wasn't the first time this had happened, so we'd been through this before. I grabbed my jacket from the front closet and got my keys, then opened the front door to leave. As soon as I opened the door, my whole body jumped. There was a man standing right in front of me on the porch, like literally a foot away from the door. He had a heavy coat with a black gaiter neck, scarf covering his lower face. The man didn't move at all, though like he wasn't equally as startled as me for a second. I was just embarrassed for getting spooked like that. But then I immediately got curious why he was here before I could ask. He apologized and said he was just about to knock. I said it was all right and asked what he needed. The man took a second, then asked if I was David or Daryl. I don't know, something like that. Whoever it was wasn't me. I said no, and the man just said okay, and started walking off the porch. I stepped outside and shut and locked the door behind me, making sure. The man walked all the way down my driveway and away from my home. Before I got in my car, I pretty much thought about that weird encounter the whole drive to my friend's work. My home was in a secluded neighborhood, like you don't get random people just going up to people's houses very often, because they were so deep in the woods with long driveways. If he was just someone looking for someone else, I guess that did explain it. Though I picked up my friend and we grabbed a quick meal at Culver's. Then I drove him to his place and dropped him off. It was around 9 o'clock p.m. by this point. It was snowing just a little bit, but otherwise it was pretty calm outside. When I got home, I pulled into the driveway and walked up to the front door, unlocking it. And getting inside, I took a moment to warm up. Then hopped on the couch and turned the TV on. I didn't keep track of time after this, because I didn't have to work tomorrow. So there was no need to if I had to guess. I was probably on the couch for 2 hours before I got tired. I got up and stretched, turning the TV off and starting to walk over to the stairs. But when I passed by the front door, I suddenly remembered that guy that was outside earlier. I'd pretty much forgotten about it up until now. Now that I was thinking about it though, I walked up to the door and looked out the peephole. Just to ease my mind, nobody was on the porch, and the night still looked calm, still snowing. And not very windy. However, after a second, I noticed something going across the driveway. It wasn't clear, so I had to open the door to get a better look. There were shoe prints in the thin layer of snow. They seemed to come all the way up the driveway from the road and near my car. Then they walked off into the yard, where the trees blocked my view immediately. I felt very unnerved. I shut and locked the door. If this was the same guy as last time coming back again, then something was seriously wrong. I kept looking back out the windows as I tried to think of what to do next, thinking back on how strange my interaction with the guy was earlier only made it worse in the moment. I was concerned enough to call the police. I dialed 911 and stayed by the window as I explained my situation. As I was talking though, I kept hearing something subtle. Every time I'd pause and listen, I wouldn't hear it anymore. The operator probably thought I was crazy, but about a minute into the call, there was a violent thud against the back of the house. I almost dropped my phone from how much it made me jump. I hurried over to the hallway, hearing another loud thud. As I looked down, there was someone outside the back door, with the reflections of light from inside the house contrasted with the dark outside. I couldn't see anything but slight movement behind the door. Another thud crashed into it. It was heavy. They definitely had some kind of weapon or something to break the door down. With the operator told me to either find somewhere to hide and lock myself away or find an escape. I decided to grab my keys and sprint to my car, even though I knew the man was behind my house. It was still terrifying running out into the open. There could have been more than one person, or even someone waiting by my car. Thankfully there wasn't, and I was able to get away. It was a good thing I left, because when the cops got there, the back door had been beaten open, and watery shoe prints filled the house. But nobody was inside. All I could really give the officers was a description of the man who was at my doorstep, which there was no actual evidence of it being the same person. So if they did find him, it wouldn't do much anyways. But they never did, whether or not it was him, though. I think I got lucky that I ran into him on my way out of the house. Had I not, I wouldn't have checked out the door before going to bed. If I was asleep already, maybe they would have been more subtle with breaking in. I don't know, but what's so unnerving is that this all happened on just an ordinary day. There was no way to know. It could be any day that something like this happens with him, still out there sometimes. I feel like I'm just waiting for it to happen again. It was 2019. I was a sophomore in college and did babysitting 3 to 4 nights a week as a means for paying off my car for about a month. I had this 3-year-old boy that I'd watch once a week. The parents were soft-spoken but friendly. They'd always leave around bedtime, so all I'd have to do is make sure the kids stayed asleep and was okay while they were gone for usually 4 to 5 hours. This night I pulled in at 8 p.m. I said hi to the parents who mentioned. The kid was already in their room asleep. Then they thanked me and left. I never asked what they did going out this late every week. I think they mentioned one time that they went to the city. Maybe it was like a date night or something. Anyway, I put my bag down and did a walkthrough of the house like I usually did, then sat on a chair in the living room. They'd always say feel free to watch TV or cook dinner or whatever. But usually I just sit on my phone to pass the time, occasionally walking by the kids' room to make sure they were okay. Not even an hour in though, I got a call from the mother. I obviously answered, but I was confused when she asked if I called her just now. I said no, I was still at the house and hadn't called for anything. I guess she had gotten a call from an unsaved number. But nobody said anything. When she answered, she thought maybe I'd gotten a new phone or was using a different one or something, and the call just didn't come through correctly. I assured her we were all good here, and she said okay, and hung up. I thought nothing of it. She was probably just a concerned parent wanting to make sure everything was good. I did another check on the kid, then sat down again. About 20 minutes passed. I was still on my phone watching a video when I saw headlights shine into the front windows. The light came in through the cracks between the blinds. I thought it was just a neighbor pulling into their house. But after a couple minutes of the light not shutting off, I got up and peeked out the window. There was a dark gray sedan parked right out front of the house. By the curb it was old and rusty, and the windows were blacked out. I was so focused on the car for a minute, I almost didn't even notice the guy standing a few feet from it. They were closer to the end of the driveway, standing near the sidewalk and looking up at the house I was in. I was a little concerned, but I didn't want to confront them, since it wasn't even my house. So I just watched from the window. After a minute he walked back to his car and got in. Oddly, they pulled away very slowly, like they were still focused on looking at the house. I watched as their headlights went down the road, cutting in and out of the trees. But then they stopped again. I could see the light between the trees staying still far down the road. Then it shut off, like they had parked and got out. Maybe it was someone visiting a neighbor, and they were trying to find the address numbers, and got mixed up somehow, feeling like it was a little strange. I stayed by the window for a good 5 minutes, but I never saw the man come back down to the house. So I figured it was probably just a weird coincidence. I went back to the chair in the living room. I did think about texting the parents, but didn't want to worry them about something that was likely nothing. Plus, it probably wouldn't have made a difference to anything anyways. I decided to turn the TV on, keeping it on low volume, so I didn't wake up the kid. A few minutes in, I went to open the blinds as well, because I found myself still thinking about it. A whole hour and a half passed, or maybe even 2 hours. Nothing really happened during that time. I just waited in the living room with the TV on, and tried my best to stay awake. My eyes were getting heavy, and I could tell I was half asleep, like I was still awake but just fully spaced out, and my eyes partially open. But through my less than aware state I was in, I randomly heard a light thump. It didn't fully wake me until I heard it again. My eyes opened wider, and I got up. I wasn't sure what it was, but I wanted to check on the kid first. So I started walking to the stairs. But when I passed through the hallway, I heard it again and saw something in the corner of my eye. I turned my head. There was someone outside the back door, pulling on the handle and looking right at me. Once he saw me looking at him, he started pulling on the handle even harder, trying to brute force it open. My adrenaline kicked in, and I sprinted up the stairs. I went in the room and got the kid, trying to keep them calm. As I was up there, the thumps got louder, like now he was using something to rip open the door. With the kid in my arms, I hurried down the stairs. When I got to the bottom, there was one more sound. It sounded like cracking plastic and metal. I went back into the hallway, toward the front door. But I saw the back door was open, and the man was rushing inside. He had regular casual clothes on and dark hair. That was all I saw before I noticed a knife in his hand. He didn't hesitate to start running at me. I rushed out the front door, getting into my car, and backing out just as he got up to my window. I drove to a safe place and called 911. And the parents, of course. He was gone before anyone got there. The way I see it, I think the man was going to threaten me with the knife or even harm me, so he could kidnap the kid. That's what it felt like was going to happen. But how did he know the parents would be away? And why kidnap this kid specifically? What's weird is, after all of it, the parents stopped talking to me and never hired me again. They thanked me on the night of the incident, but then went radio silent. It was like they didn't want me to find anything out about what happened. I did my own research but didn't find much. Only thing I found out was that the mother had been married before to a man that looked somewhat similar to the guy. I saw no way to know for sure though. I'm just speculating. It's been years now, so I don't think we'll be getting any answers.